Over the years, marketers have been analyzing the different generations, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and recently we have seen there's a red thread among all of them: speed. They all want everything to happen now. My name is Francisco Serrano, and I am the Chief Speed Officer at One-to-One and the host of the Now Gen podcast. Join me. Each episode, we talk about what's happening with brands, see how brand professionals across different industries cope with this fast-changing market, and live up to the expectation of this now generation. Welcome.
This episode is brought to you by One-to-One, the fastest day-to-day design and content studio. For more than 17 years, One-to-One has been their premier partner for many Fortune 500 companies, proving that tight deadlines shouldn't be a hassle.
Hello, and welcome again to one more episode of the Now Generation. Technology is taking us places that we've never thought we would go. And on the other hand, connectivity, it's becoming more and more popular among humans, and now with AI, non-humans, right? So, and technology brings that path closer, and how do you manage? It's so sophisticated because you have the e-com, you have the digital, you have social media. There's a lot of things going on in the digital realm that we just don't know about. And, the now generation, people that want everything to happen now, they just don't know how to manage that, or how, or all the potential that technology has to offer to them. So for that, we have a very special guest that knows all the ins and outs of that world. And we're going to have a very engaging and entertaining conversation to talk about this topic. He is Marc Maleh. He's a Senior Vice President of Emerging Technology and Connected Experiences at Valtech. He will tell us, we'll talk about the connected experience and the evolution of retail throughout new technologies. So very excited about what we're about to discuss, Marc. Thank you for being here at the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Francisco.
Excellent. So before we dive into this conversation, tell us exactly how do you ended up where you're at? Exactly what does Valtech do, and what do you do for them?
Yeah, so my background kind of took a couple pivots. Starting in college, where I studied fine art and photography, and I originally thought I was going to be an engineer, and I kind of realized I hated math. And my photography professor, not to date myself, essentially told me that he thought the internet was going to be a big deal, and that I had an eye for design and just getting my hands dirty and building things. And he tasked me with actually building the art department's website. And I was like, why are you asking me this? Like, we go to an engineering school, we have a computer science department. And he bought me very early Flash and Macromedia books and HTML books. And I kind of fell in love with technology at that time. And just this idea that I could be making, things at the time in a physical darkroom with photography, but I could also be making these digital things, through computer programming and, digital design and things like that. And that was actually my first job out of college, was actually as, a software developer. So kind of self-taught. And, throughout the years, like I held numerous roles in the startup world, living in China and in the US, running technology teams. And I kind of fell into more of an operational role at the first agency that I worked at, RGA. And I've since been, around the block, spending time at traditional agencies, kind of learning more about content creation and storytelling, but always through the lens of how technology can kind of impact those things. And I've spent time on the brand side as well, And now here at Valtech, I get to bring a lot of those things together. I get to kind of bring the emerging technology side and kind of the evangelizing of those types of tools, but also humanizing them in a good story and, an understanding of how these technologies can show up both in the physical world and the digital world for large brands. And I think, I believe technology is just an enabler of human connections when done well. And that's the type of mentality and insight that I try to bring to my clients and frankly our teams here at Valtech, whether they're a designer or whether they're an engineer.
Okay, so you're a senior VP of emerging technology and connected experiences, right? And speed is just affecting influencing everything and evolving technology. It's constant. I mean, how do you catch a break? What is a, I mean, you're just starting to adapt to the new technology coming out and then a new one comes. I mean, how does this constant innovation affects brand growth from your perspective?
I mean, I think the pace is incredibly fast, but to a degree, the pace is also somewhat cyclical. And I think a lot of times the way we think about the way we advise our clients when it comes to these emerging technologies is not always just jump in and go do it. A lot of times it's actually slow down, pump the brakes. Let's take a minute to see whether or not this technology is even relevant for your brand. And, using artificial intelligence as an example, everybody is talking about it. Everybody's trying to find ways to utilize it. But to a degree, a lot of the big brands out there are still just trying to figure out like, what's their stance on it. And I think that's actually the best way to kind of pursue is not just jump in. I think there are times when, we advise, a lot of our clients to, yes, maybe do a proof of concept using a new technology, but don't just do it in a vacuum. Do a proof of concept based on, an insight that you think it's going to help solve either within your business or how, your customers or your guests actually interact with the brand. And, the proof of concept can prove many times what you should do, but I actually think more often than not, it's better when it proves what you shouldn't do with emerging technology. And sometimes a difficult conversation, I think, when you're working with clients is saying like, hey, you're going to invest a little bit of money in this, but we might actually tell you that it's shit and that you shouldn't do this anymore. And the smart clients understand that actually that's a good thing because you invested a smaller amount of money to do some testing, do some customer research, get a tangible thing in the hands of some of your customers, as opposed to just saying, oh, we're going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars to go just make that product and let's put it out there in the world, only to find out that its engagement and value is actually pretty low.
Yeah, and when you were saying interaction with the consumer and test it out, then I do believe, like you, that sometimes clients they just go on a mission to do it and implement $100,000 because it is the thing out there. But when people say no, this is not right for you, they just jump and say, why not? Let's just do it. And we don't like that answer. But anyways, as far as the other portion of your life within the professional world here is to connected experiences. What does that mean in your industry? What is a connected experience?
Yeah, so connected experiences, is primarily the work that we do at the intersection of the physical world and the digital. So whether that's how technology and user journeys are showing up in, say, a retail space, or with some of the work that we do for theme parks, as example. And a lot of times what we're finding is those things come closer and closer together in the way that we think about that type of work. So, connected experiences is just kind of a terminology out there that kind of is encompassing, of the digital and physical environments. I frankly also believe that a lot of the work that we do in, say, automotive or IoT, can also be considered connected experiences because, our cars right now are as connected to, the internet as my laptop that, we're doing this podcast on. So I think like that intersection of kind of physical and digital is really the general theme, I would say, in that world.
Okay. And you were talking about theme parks. Is there like a challenge that you have faced, trying to maybe in a theme park or any other retail that you might be able to share, even that it's already there out there in practice that can explain a little bit better that connectivity?
Yeah. So, I think, some of the work out there, that we've done and that I've been, fortunate even in previous lives to kind of touch, like, a lot of it is about just engagement with consumers in a new and interesting way in the physical world, in the retail world, right? And I think prior to COVID, we saw a huge trend, especially with things like the cosmetic industry of like, doing virtual try-ons, right? In the cosmetic world, or, the ability to, and this is some stuff we've done for, like some large cosmetic brands out there like MAC, being able to like pick up a product off of the shelf and actually the content on the screen in front of you changing based on the product that you picked up, right? Like as example. But then how does that actually tie to a broader user journey that consumer, that guest is actually having within the physical retail footprint? How are they experiencing that store, not only while they're there, but even in kind of the discovery of going to that store? Are there certain services that maybe they want to sign up for and have a specific appointment with an expert while they're actually at the store? And then, how are we closing that loop with that consumer for when they leave? I think a lot of these experiences, whether it's in kind of the theme park world or whether it's in the retail world, this idea of a value exchange between the consumer and the brand and the data that you can collect throughout all of those different touch points, right? So if we know that a consumer is interested in a certain service prior to them going to a physical retail store, and they execute on those things in the retail store, but they ended up buying maybe different products, those are all breadcrumbs. Those are all data points that we can then use in the way that we actually communicate to them after they leave the store, right? Or 2 weeks later, and maybe invite them back to the store to have a different experience. And then obviously also things like being able to drive to e-com at that point. So I think, that's generally, I would say, a connection between a lot of these different physical environments and the digital world.
Yeah, and like you were saying, there are many challenges out there for brands, and also to connect. There are many channels to connect with consumers. What makes a channel good for a brand from your perspective?
Oh, it's so brand specific, right? I mean, I think, a brick and mortar store that's right for, and COVID changed a lot when it comes to the mentality, I would say, around brick and mortar versus e-com. And actually now coming out of COVID, it's kind of it's swinging in the other direction where a lot of people are craving going back to brick and mortar stores, where prior to COVID, we were seeing a massive trend in e-com. And obviously during COVID, when everything was closed, a huge uplift in kind of, e-com and a necessity for direct to consumer brands to kind of go hard in that direction. But I think, now, people just want to be out again. I think some of the challenges, that generally people or brands are kind of facing right now is like, with economic uncertainty, is how can we be efficient with assets that we actually already have? And how can we leverage those things to create new experiences on top of assets that they already have, as opposed to maybe always feeling like you have to create net new assets or net new experiences. So I think there's a little, right now, I think the challenge is a little bit around efficiency, which sometimes goes against the idea of innovation and innovating in a certain space, but actually sometimes actually can be a good catalyst for it, right? I think, people always say that, when you have to be more efficient, you actually can drive more innovation, because it's a constraint that you have to work within. So, I think the challenges that we see economically, are not necessarily going to shut down a brand's ability to innovate, but I think they're at least going to give us, some constraints, and that probably is going to be one of the challenges.
Yeah, and with the challenges that you constantly have as a brand with this connectivity issue, and the, like we were saying offline, the instant gratification, do you by the way, do you feel that instant gratification, it's a need out there that people have, and that it's increasingly across all the different generations?
I mean, I have a 10-year-old son, so I live and breathe his concept of instant gratification. Um, and I would say it is. And I think, he grew up in a world of not even knowing what a TV commercial is, right? Like he's grown up in a world where, when he wants to watch Seinfeld, he can pull up Seinfeld on Netflix. Like it's not, we grew up in a world where I had to wait until 9 p.m. to watch Seinfeld. I had no other option.
Yeah,
Um, and I think it's so from a content perspective, that is fully baked into his kind of expectations and will continue. I think we're trying, my wife and I try to do things to actually temper that and actually have them understand this idea that like not everything can be instant all the time, right? Um, and I think that same expectation is so true when you think about all the other platforms that so many people have used over the past 15 years, right? Like Uber, instant taxi, right? Like Instacart, instant groceries at your door, Amazon Prime, right away. And all of those things I think, are a lot of brands right now are trying to figure out how they can be a part of that instant gratification cycle, right? And I think, that idea that I can buy a pair of sneakers and actually I can buy it online and that afternoon it can be at my doorstep. That's real, right? And you look at Amazon and they have a whole suite of services that brands can use that actually they do kind of that last mile delivery, pretty much instantaneously. But that's there's a balance to that, which is actually getting people outside and getting people to do some research and do some understanding about what they actually want, right? And I think there's in my mind even a sustainability side of that is, yeah, I can have something instantly here, but like, is it the best thing for me? Is it the best thing for the environment? What's it actually going to do? Can I be more efficient about that whole life cycle? Everybody complains about you order that 1 inch by 1 inch thing from Amazon and it comes in a box that's a foot by a foot, like just because I wanted it the following day. Did I really need it the following day? Maybe not. So I think there's a little bit of that balance that I think having a child, like, we try to instill in him is like, it's okay if something's not instant. Like sometimes obviously there are certain things that you do need right away, yes. But like I would say most things you don't need instant gratification, right? You don't need it now. Um, I think there's also geographically, I would say different mentalities when it comes to those things, right? Like you live in an urban environment, the pace and the intensity of being able to get things instantaneously is actually a lot more almost necessary, right? Or, and because it's also expected. But, when you live in the woods, it's not necessarily as expected or as feasible because you just don't have all of those things available. So you deal with it. And guess
yeah,
what? It's not a big deal. Life
yeah.
goes on and it's okay.
Yeah, but you tell me if the brands are, yeah, that's not a big deal. Let's stand down and let the thing go. They're just going to be willing to push all the time. So, for example, I'm going to tell you this scenario, and I'm just making this out of the blue. I don't know if it's even possible to make it. I know that I've seen it out there in several other places, but you were talking about, what is this? Amusement parks, right? So my last time I went to Disney, they gave me this, like little pass that that apparently you're connected
Yep. Yeah.
somehow
The
to
smart
them.
band. Yep.
Yeah. Right. So I don't know how it works exactly, but imagine that that has a biometrics powers, whatever that means, and it understands when I am hungry, and it pushes like a coupon for a hot dog or whatever. And or if I'm shouting at my kid, don't do that, and my levels of stress are certain, then yo, there's your fast pass to it says more world in it, so you can come down and you get a fast pass, and you're gonna, is that like, it's creepy, but I mean, it happens now. And I mean, we're talking now, and I'm sure that Disney is going to appear in my story somehow magically, right? So is that kind of where it's going to take us, the next steps in the instant gratification world and technology?
Two answers to that, which is one, it's already happening. I think to a degree, right? Like people have Apple Watches and people have Samsung watches and Android, the Google Android watch, and like they can literally do everything that you just talked about. The difference is from a privacy perspective, like you're not yet allowed to kind of fully harness all the health technology and data, for the types of services that you're talking about. And then the other side of that kind of comment is actually, I hope that doesn't happen, right? Because I think, there is that balance between where, and I mentioned this idea of like data value exchange earlier, there is that balance of like, what am I willing to give up for a specific experience or a specific brand to have knowledge about what I'm craving, and actually what I need, right? And I think your personal health data, to a degree, is something that I think a lot of people still want to really retain within a certain bubble. Granted, things like Strava for health tracking, the Nike ecosystem for health tracking, but I'm opting in to do those things, right? When I go mountain biking or I go skiing, I am opting in to turn my Strava on, and I'm saying, this is why I'm using it.
Yeah.
As opposed to I just put my watch on and automatically, my son's Apple Watch, tells him when it's loud in the room if he has the TV too high up. But, as of today, it's kind of stopping at that moment.
Yeah, incredible, right? The technology, where is it going to take us? But I mean, aside from the health data that it, of course, it has a bumpy road. It is happening now that everything is starting slowly to be connected, and to help every brand build their own experience within their retail or whatever, right? So connecting the human to the retail to whatever, like it's impressive, right?
It is, and that's the fertile territory, I think, for a lot of brands, and they haven't necessarily, not all of them have fully leveraged this. I mean, the Holy Grail, to a degree, is figuring out how do you bring the technology and the personalization and, the call it efficiencies of e-commerce and the internet into a physical world. There are some constraints in regards to how you can actually do that, right? But because of your mobile device being essentially tied to you at all times, there are ways, right? And there are ways that you can deliver unique experiences that are personalized to consumers in the physical world, whether it's on the device or even some interesting technology that some airlines have been, playing around with, where digital signage in the physical world can actually be personalized to you, based on the angle in which you're looking at the digital signage, right? Delta is famous for kind of experimenting with some of those things. And so I think like we're slowly starting to get to a place where the physical world can mimic some of what's happening kind of on the digital world and on an e-com perspective. But, I personally do think that even just good spatial design, and thinking about how technology and good spatial design come together in the physical world is still a huge opportunity for a lot of brands that haven't quite cracked that. and again, technology doesn't always have to be in your face. Technology can be something that is actually, transparent, and something that actually is there to utilize and actually engage you with another human, as opposed to just be like, I'm engaging with this technology to go engage with another technology. Because human-to-human contact, I think, is still a very, very important thing.
Yeah, and talking about retail specifically, right? Because when you were talking about every brand and the challenges, if I were a brand that it has some retail realm, but also ecom and social media, and what is from your perspective, what are the key roles that or the key, because there are so many softwares out there, so many tools, so many devices, and where do you start? How do you build a user experience that makes sense, and that you can put it in your day-to-day kind of role as a marketer to make sure that you are nurturing those relationships with your consumers?
The first biggest step is truly get an understanding of who your consumers actually are. I think that's something that I think a lot of brands, actually, they think they know who their consumers are, and they think they know who's spending money with the brand. But when you actually dig into some of the personas and you actually study their path to purchase, whether it's on ecom or whether it's in the physical world, a lot of brands, their eyes open up, right? And they're like, oh, we didn't actually know that, right? Like, we didn't know that X percentage of people came from this demographic or from this, this silo. And that, if you don't have an understanding of who your target and who your consumers are, doesn't really matter what other user journeys you come up with or whatever, technology you want to recommend, because the foundation of what you're trying to do is just not sound, right? You're not on good footing. So I would say understanding who your actual consumer is step one, and really, really, really important.
Okay. And then once you have that, technology tools, are there like specific to an industry, to entertainment industry or retail industry? And then is there like how do you come about all this technology?
So there's not necessarily a playbook. I think at Valtech, we truly believe that we are technology agnostic.
Mm.
I don't go to a client and say, I need to sell you blank technology, right? It starts with, what's the business problem that you guys are trying to solve as a brand? And then sometimes part of that work is also recommending technology solutions. And those could be everything ranging from, a new CMS to a new e-commerce solution, to a new point of sale in the physical world, or whatever it is, right? So I think starting from a place where you're actually, involving technology, right? We early in our processes involve people from our technology, our creative technology teams, but not starting with, here is a technology. It should be a decision aspect and a data point that we utilize, but not the only data point. When we're trying to solve like a business problem for a client. And sometimes, frankly, I've received briefs in my years doing this, where a client comes to me with a brief, and it starts with a technology. I won't name the brand, but I literally got a brief one time that said, we need augmented reality. And I didn't read any further. And I said to the client, I called them, at a very good relationship at the time, and I still do. And I said, this isn't a brief. Like, you just told me you need augmented reality. Like, and I know it's funny, me pushing back on that, being the bearded nerdy guy, but like, you got to give me a problem. Like, what's the problem you're trying to solve? And like, we'll come back to you. And like, if you're interested in augmented reality, we'll use that as a lens, but don't just tell me you need augmented reality. Help me solve what your business problem is, and help me solve what maybe the usability problem is that you think augmented reality can help solve. And, it repositioned a little bit of the relationship in a good way, because we became more of a trusted strategic advisor where it wasn't just, oh, we'll do whatever you want us to do, right? It's more, hey, like, we're actually going to help you try to solve a broader issue. We ended up doing augmented reality because it actually made sense, to solve the business problem that they gave us, but it wasn't the first thing that we looked at.
Great. It's impressive how, I mean, we can go and talk about this forever, but I think before we wrap this one up, Mark, what do you think of all this that we've been talking about? And from your experience, how do what's the key takeaway from our listeners?
So I think some key takeaways are, if you're a brand, I think a key takeaway would be make sure that the way you're thinking about involving technology across e-com and, physical footprints, make sure it's cohesive and actually is very clearly positioned within your brand voice. Because consumers, they see your brand as the top, right? And if you have a bad experience in the physical world and a great experience in the digital world, those two things, if they don't meet, it doesn't really matter. They're only going to remember the bad experience, right? And I think technology a lot of times is the equalizer across those things, or at least it should be. And and making sure that your brand is kind of the first thing you're thinking about and frankly protecting in the way that you think about a consumer and all of their touch points across physical and across digital. And it can be technology in the physical world, but literally it can also just be good signage or wayfinding in the physical world and how that matches with, the experience I have in digital. So I would say that from kind of a brand perspective. I would say if you're, in kind of the consulting world or in the agency world, I think it's a little more about being conscious about the technologies that you are recommending to your clients and thinking about the impact that those technologies have on the brand and on the overall experiences that the consumers will have with the brand. Because it's not one size fits all anymore. So if you're in the consulting world, I would probably focus primarily on that.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. It is impressive how little we know about what's out there and how we can use not only technology but also the right mindset to deliver that experience, like you say, right? The brand, the retail, e-com, and every aspect together, and how to interact. Yeah, I never thought that we would go back to retail as we did, right? I could say that yes, but no, I thought it was going to be more e-com, and now people are just trying to connect humanly, right? We're humans. We want to see human to human, and yeah, it's impressive. Thank you for sharing that, Mark. Where can people reach out to you if they want to connect? Social channels that you have.
LinkedIn, probably the best in this space.
Okay.
Obviously my name, Marc Maleh, or I think on LinkedIn I'm mfunk1000, just for
Okay.
fun. But you can also just good old Google will usually come up with me.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts here with us. We've been talking to Marc Maleh. He's the Senior Vice President of Emerging Technology and Connected Experiences at Valtech. Thank you very much for being here with us. And for all of you, please do not leave another episode without watching. These guys are professionals. They know what they're doing, and they're telling us how to face this challenge of the now generation. So stay tuned for the next episode, and thank you for listening today.